Hey, welcome to BIA Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. It is August 31st. Football season is here. There was actual live college football last weekend. Outside of Illinois, Nebraska, I don't really remember any of it. And that Illinois-Nebraska game, I would prefer to forget. Not that I have a rooting interest for either of those teams, but it was not great football. But Ohio State football, 2 days away. We'll talk plenty about the Buckeyes. We'll talk plenty about college football in general. But Joseph, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Kevin, thanks for having me on again. And I can't believe you forgot the biggest game of the past weekend, the highly touted Bishop Sycamore team against IMG Academy. It was a great game to watch, and I'm just kidding there. That was a story for a separate show there that we can talk about. But I'm really happy about it. I'm really happy to see not only high school football starting, but college football starting. This past weekend, and obviously coming up here in a couple of days with Ohio State against Minnesota. Very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've had the chance to get out and see a little high school action. I got to go and see Pickerington Central and Massillon go on, and was really there to go see Sonny Styles, and I don't think Sonny Styles is going to sneak up on anybody. Massillon really didn't want anything to do with him. Pickerington Central won a game that was not one to really write home about in terms of how it looked. It was an ugly first half. Pick Central did what it needed to in the second half, but you really don't realize how much you miss the full football experience. Last year we had games that occurred with little fans. We had games that occurred with no fans. Being able to be there at Paul Brown Stadium to go see that high school game, and while I won't say every seat was filled, a lot of seats were filled, and it was really, I was very happy to be part of that. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be getting on a plane tomorrow on Wednesday, heading to Minneapolis, and we'll be able to see the Ohio State game on Thursday. A band playing, fans in the stands, the whole 9 yards. Very excited about all of that.
Yeah, I can't wait to experience those live action games. Obviously last year was very difficult with what went on, but honestly, it makes you kind of appreciate those small little things. The band playing, and being able to be in the press conference and the press box and talk with the coaches like in person. No more Zoom calls. You just appreciate those small things. So yes, hopefully we get a really good game on Thursday. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Let's just kind of start in general in terms of just excitement for the season coming out of that 2020 year. I mean, obviously, Ohio State goes to the national championship game, finally gets that big win over Clemson. Were a lot of good stories from 2020. Mm-hmm. There were bad ones, too. Ohio State wasn't able to play 3 games due to COVID restrictions. Players were being shuffled in and out of the lineup. I mean, a lot of stuff. I mean, I won't even get started on Kevin Warren and the cancellation and the non-revisitation and then the reverse course and bring the season back. All of that garbage. But what are you most excited about this season, just big picture?
Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it being a normal season. No more question marks before the season about whether or not they're going to be able to play at all, if it's going to be pushed to the spring. And then during the season as well, would they even be able to qualify for the Big Ten championship? And then you have comments made by other coaches in terms of whether they played enough games to fill a resume that would make the playoffs. Those are concerns and outside distractions that Ohio State won't have to face this year. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see, how they respond to that. Is there a greater appreciation for what they have going on now that the only real big, obviously there's a lot of off-season questions, especially with the secondary and how they're going to bounce back. But the big, thing was the quarterback competition between C.J. Stroud, Kyle McCord, Jack Miller. And, now that question being answered, Ohio State just gets to go into the season against Minnesota really distraction-free for the most part. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking forward to seeing the most, Kevin, is just seeing how they adjust in comparison to a pretty crazy and hectic year last season.
Where goes one jumps in with his prediction, 45-24 Ohio State. We'll make our predictions here by the end of the show. and kind of go from there. But where goes one? Thanks for being part of the show. Thanks for jumping in. Anybody else who wants to jump in with their predictions, I'll be sure to punch them through here on the show. Ohio State, Minnesota. I don't want to necessarily want to get into our preview of it yet, but just Ohio State opening with a league opponent, opening on the road, and it's not something that's been completely foreign. Ohio State has opened against Indiana before. The Big Ten made a move several years ago to start spreading the inventory amongst the 13 to 14 weeks, depending on if there's 1 or 2 open weeks on the schedule, to make sure that they're more meaningful games, to make sure that you don't have 14 games against the MAC, the Sun Belt, and Conference USA or whatever. It's an opportunity to spread that out. Do you think that it's a good situation, a bad situation? It is what it is for Ohio State, breaking in a new quarterback, breaking in largely a good portion of the back seven on defense. Is this good or bad for Ohio State to get an opponent who, okay, sure, they haven't played Minnesota since 2018. They've only played them 4 times since 2010, but it's still a team that is very familiar with Ohio State due to crossover film and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect setup for Ohio State. You get a nice little road game and a game that Ohio State is expected to win. You get to break in C.J. Stroud, that new secondary, as you mentioned, get to kind of see some of the young guys step up and see what they can do. And then the good part is that you have a couple of extra days to prepare for Oregon instead of starting off the season on Saturday, September 4th. They're going to be able to have a couple of extra days since they're going to be playing on Thursday. So, yeah, I actually think this is a better start. It's like look over at Clemson, Georgia, where you have DJ from Clemson. I know he played last year. He played in one game that Trevor Lawrence was out, but there's a big time season opener for a young quarterback like him against a team like Georgia. That's a tough spot to be put into, and for CJ Stroud to get the opportunity to play a team like Minnesota, a team that they're expected to win against, and then play that Oregon game. Yeah, I think that was the best case scenario for Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't know if they would have really gained anything by playing East, Northwestern directional state here in week 1 and then have to draw Oregon. I think that getting out there on the road, playing a league opponent, playing somebody that, while I don't see, a huge amount of overlap in terms of recruiting, Minnesota and Ohio State kind of recruit in different pools. Still, there's something to be said about Power 5, Big Ten caliber players, and then maybe guys who were looked over who might be at that, Sisters of the Poor that I mentioned before. So I think in a lot of ways it is good for Ohio State to get that early test. I like this a lot better than drawing Penn State week 1. I think that, the odds makers have Ohio State anywhere between a 13 to 14 and a half point favorite. I mean, they certainly believe in Ohio State. I'm going to say something that'll probably piss off our viewers or whatever. Ohio State was like a 4-touchdown favorite over Purdue and, a large favorite against Iowa and subsequently lost those games. So you can't just base stuff on the lines. But, with that being said, I still think Minnesota is kind of a mid-tier Big Ten school. I know as we get closer to the games, people will get more and more nervous. You have this one group that has this upward arc of bravado, and then you've got this other group that has this downward arc of, oh my God, everything could go wrong, and it probably will, and all hope is lost, and I don't even know what I'm going to do if Ohio State loses. I think you need to ride somewhere between both of those, but I think it's going to be it's going to present enough of a challenge, but I don't think it's going to be an overwhelming challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are fearful do have a reason to be nervous in terms of if Ohio State loses that first game against Minnesota, then, I mean, I don't know what the odds makers would have it at, but it would get really, really dicey against Oregon. How would they respond to a loss like that, an early season loss? And, that's when you get into the worst case scenario. And it's obviously kind of easy to sink yourself into that, especially with the unknown here. You haven't seen CJ Stroud throw a college pass in a live game yet. You still want to see what this secondary can do after being one of the worst units last season in terms of passing yards allowed. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered against Minnesota. And if Ryan Day and his staff can check off, some of those boxes and answer some of those questions after the game. And, they come out with a solid win, 14, 21 points, whatever, 2 or 3 touchdowns. They'll be happy with that. And once again, like I mentioned, having a couple of extra days to prepare for Oregon, that's just as good as it gets for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, exactly. Because you do have the situation of, you're playing a night game on the road. You're going to get home at 4 a.m. or whatever, but that goes into Friday. I mean, you're able to have at least a little bit of extra time. I don't know necessarily if having, 2 extra days is going to be world changing. It's not like having an open week and having 2 weeks to prepare. But as Joseph said, it certainly is something. It certainly is something to be able to go through that. I mean, these are going to be the first real bangs and you're getting bangs and bruises during camp. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
This is where you're going against players who are hitting with bad intentions and things of that nature. So having a little extra treatment time, being able to kind of see where you're at, I think all of that's going to be very important, more than them having just an extra day to install for Minnesota or for Oregon. I don't know if an extra day of install is going to change anything. I think it's the R&R. I think it's the ability to get yourself back onto a normal schedule where you're playing on Saturday, that you've got best Fridays in football on Friday as opposed to on Wednesday. I mean, I think that's going to be important to kind of right the ship. But let's kind of talk about the game. Then we'll talk about college football in general. Then we'll share a couple of our favorite maybe memories from a year on the road, whether it be 2 weeks of Southern Swing, our trip through the Atlantic East, or through Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. But let's start there, because Where Goes One certainly has jumped in with a lot of predictions and whatnot. Well, here's another prediction from Chris, 42-20 Ohio State. We will hit through all of these. Where Goes One saying hi to It's Just Me, Tim. A lot of our regulars are starting to show up now. We didn't promote this show very well. That's on me. A lot going on. I'll do better, I promise, as this show is going to morph a little, and I'll tell you about that at the end. But let's talk about the game, and we're not going to get into heavy X's and O's. That's, check out, follow me at BuckeyeGrove.com. Follow me for Tale of the Tape, which is coming out tomorrow. We're going to have Behind Enemy Lines. Definitely keep it locked in at BuckeyeGrove.com as your destination for all of that. But, Joseph, when you sit there and you look at these two teams, you see a team in Minnesota that was 3-4 last year, coming off of what was an 11-2 season, top 10 type of team the year before. Rashad Bateman's not walking through that door. There certainly are some players that are not going to be on this 21 edition of the team, but Minnesota's still returning something like 18, 20 starters. I mean, it's going to be an experienced team, but I think sometimes we fall in a trap of saying, well, they're returning everybody. Well, if you're returning everybody off a team that was sub 500, what are you returning?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, honestly, you don't know what Minnesota team you're going to get. You're going to get the 11-2 team, the 3-4 team. I kind of like that Ryan Day recently said that, this was a team that did have a subpar season last year, but the year before they were a strong unit. And that really goes to show that they're not going to underestimate Minnesota and what they may bring to the table. But at the end of the day, this is a game Ohio State should win. You look at the predictions in the comments there, it's in blowout fashion. I don't know if I would necessarily say that it's going to be over 20 points. It's kind of hard to predict with these early season games, especially season openers. You have a new quarterback in. So I'm a little bit hesitant on that. But yeah, it's a game Ohio State should win by double digits, in my opinion. It's going to be a nice road game to open up the season. But the main things I'm really going to be looking for is, how CJ Stroud performs, obviously. It was mentioned in the comments before, but also the offensive line, how much time to give him. If, the secondary, whether or not it improves vastly or not, that's not the question, in my opinion. They just need to be average at least. They can't be almost dead last like they were last season. And then also I want to see if the pass rush can be generated to help the secondary, because if you're putting pressure on the quarterback, that helps out your defensive back. So yeah, those are kind of the things I'm really looking forward to. But I'm expecting Ohio State to win, somewhere in the 40-41 24, 27 range, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I definitely expect Ohio State to win pretty handedly.
I'll make my prediction here in a couple minutes. Wait till we get to the end of this segment, and then we'll go on from there. I want to kind of start as Where Goes One jumped in with some things with a dominant O line. CJ will kill their secondary. There is a strong. They have some dudes in their secondary. Ohio State certainly has some dudes at receiver. I think, though, that Ohio State is going to be in good position to protect Stroud. I don't think Ohio State's going to put Stroud in a position to where he's having to thread the needle too much, or as my friends always used to say growing up, thread the noodle. I don't think he's going to have to thread the noodle all that much. I don't think we're going to see a ton of intermediate and deep passing over the middle. I think we're going to see we're going to see a lot of stuff outside the numbers, but I like Ohio State to run. I like Ohio State to run because Minnesota gave up 207.1 yards a game last year. Minnesota didn't face a lot of the top backs nationally. So with that being said, I could see a situation of where Minnesota's made some changes. They go and get Niles Pickney from Clemson. They go and get a linebacker from Abilene Christian. They get, I think, somebody from the secondary from NC State. They certainly have made some upgrades, or they're hoping that they're upgrades in terms of the defense. But I think when you sit there and you have an offensive line that's 4 tackles and a center, I think that the run blocking is going to be just tremendous. I think that Ohio State's ability to be able to open up holes is going to be crazy. And that's not a situation of saying, oh, Minnesota, they ain't that good. They don't have anything. No, they got some dudes. They've got some dudes. Let me find this right here is Where Goes One. Minnesota's a good team, just on the same level. Well, again, we're talking about a top 5 college football playoff regular participant in Ohio State and kind of anybody else. Ohio State doesn't have anybody on its regular season schedule. Sorry, Penn State. Sorry, team up north. Sorry, whoever. Doesn't have anybody that is on the same level in terms of classification purposes. So Ohio State should win every week. We know that's not always the case. We know that, early in the season, a week 1, a week 2 can always be a little bit dicey. You just don't know how certain things are going to react. I mean, certainly don't want to speak certain things into existence, but, I think there are going to be some challenges. But with that being said, I think that Ohio State's offense sits very well in terms of how they're going to attack Minnesota's defense. I just think the biggest trap is that they need to find a hot hand at running back and not sit there and be like, you get 5 carries, and like Oprah Winfrey, you get a car and you get a car and you get a car. You get 5 carries and you get 5 carries. Mayan Williams is going to be better carries 11 through 15 than 1 through 5. I think that you need to sit there and just be dedicated to saying, okay, we're going to ride Master Teague here for 2 series. Okay, now we're going to, now we'll do this. I mean, don't be afraid to make changes. So I think that's going to be a big question.
Yeah, I really want to see what this running back. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a running back by committee approach. It definitely seems likely that they're going to be heading in that direction. How they space out the carries. I want to see how that goes. But honestly, I'm actually kind of fine with that idea, because you throw different types of running styles at Minnesota's defense, at future opponents' defenses that they're going to have to prepare for in the coming weeks. And honestly, in my opinion, Travion Henderson can be that guy who I wouldn't, I think he's kind of the dark horse in terms of emerging as potentially the top option, as the season progresses, kind of give him some time to get acclimated. He didn't play in his 2020 season, so it's been a couple of years, but I mean, this kid is really talented. We saw him in person, Kevin, and I personally think that he can be a dynamic force out of the backfield for the Buckeyes. But, it's just me, Tim, talked about, it potentially being windy. And so I was kind of expecting, whether it was windy or not, for it to be a balanced attack between running and throwing the football. You want to be able to get CJ Stroud comfortable, get him, adjusted, not expecting him to take too many chances, because honestly, Ohio State doesn't really need to. You just need to kind of work the middle of the field a little bit, run the ball. I just think they need to kind of play it safe a little bit on offense. a little bit more conservative than they probably did last year. So yeah, I definitely believe that we're going to see more of a balanced attack, and as long as C.J. Stroud doesn't turn the ball over, as long as Master T or Mayan Williams or Travion Henderson don't fumble the ball, I think Ohio State's going to be fine. I think it should be a comfortable win for them.
Yeah, and then flipping to the other side of the ball, Ohio State's defense against Minnesota's offense. Obviously, Mo Ibrahim is going to be the guy that everybody's going to be focused on. He rushed for 150 something against Ohio State in 2018, so he's had success. Not a lot of backs can come out there and say that they've gone for more than 100. I mean, there have been a lot of Wisconsin backs that have gone on to huge numbers in terms of the season who rushed for 64 against Ohio State. So
yeah,
that's something to be said. I mean, Minnesota returns its offensive line. I think one of the big questions is going to be the status of wide receiver Chris Ottman-Bell. He's their number one. I mean, obviously, Rashad Bateman's not walking through that door. He's off to the league. He opted out toward the end of last season, ended his collegiate career. If Ottman-Bell is not able to go or is severely degraded in terms of performance, I mean, Minnesota could be looking at a true freshman as like their number one receiver. And now, if your true freshman is, I don't know, Marvin Harrison Jr., then okay. But I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. is on that Minnesota roster. And that's not to say Minnesota doesn't get some dudes. Antoine Winfield Jr. was a dude. I mean, Ohio State's love of tall corners bit them in the tail in terms of what they saw in Winfield, whether whatever he is. I mean, just in terms of tall defensive backs in general. So Ohio State certainly can't land them all, but I think that stopping the run is going to be the biggest concern there. And then, of course, the issue is everybody's going to freak out. What does this mean for Ohio State secondary? We've seen this movie before. We've lived this movie before. Where goes one believes that the secondary will be stout. But do you believe Ohio State will be able to slow down the Minnesota running game? And how do you think the secondary will fare if this turns into a we're selling out to stop the run and we're going to have to put these dudes out on an island?
Yeah, and also the linebacker unit as well too. How are they going to adjust? You lost your top four linebackers from a season ago, and that's going to be another thing that we have to pay attention to. The biggest question marks for me are on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not too much concerned about the defensive line and what they're going to be able to do, especially Pascal Garrett, manning the interior, and you have a bunch of. I'm really interested in seeing if Jack Sawyer, JT Tumulao, or get out there on the edge against Minnesota too, if they get to see some snaps. But I'm not as much concerned about the defensive line as I am about the linebacker, especially that secondary unit. So. Yeah, I'm really going to be paying attention to that, to the run game. But at the end of the day, Ohio State's, 4th or 5th best options at each position on offense would probably be number one options on Minnesota. And that's no disrespect to them. It's just more of an example, more of a reflection of what Ohio State has done with their recruiting efforts and development. So, the defense is obviously going to be the main concern. The offense does have some, questions in terms of how are they going to, use C.J. Stroud? Are they going to play a little bit more conservative than they typically would? But the defense is that's where the main concerns are for Ohio State fans, and understandably so.
Now, I guess as I get into my prediction and then we can kind of move into college football in general, I think, as I've said, I think Ohio State's going to go out and take kind of a safe approach. That doesn't mean I don't think we're not going to see a couple of times of where Garrett Wilson's going to try and stretch a field. Chris Olave, I mean, obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba can do so many things. And then the young guys, I mean, whether it be Harrison or Emeka Egbuka or even Jaden Ballard. And I think Jaden Ballard is going to be really good. I don't know if he's going to be game one ready, and that's not an injury or whatever. That's just I don't think he is as far along as Harrison Jr. or Egbuka is right now. But I think Ohio State will have, some success running the ball. I think Ohio State's defense will get punched in the mouth a couple times, but certainly not to the extent of what we've seen. Minnesota's got it's got helmets and pads and football facilities just like anybody else in Division I. So, they're going to make some plays, I think. But when it's all said and done, I think 38-14 Ohio State. I don't think that Minnesota's offense is going to be nearly as potent as some people believe. I think Ohio State's offense is going to bog down at some points. I think there are going to just be some opportunities that they leave on the field. I certainly think message board communities and talk radio is going to have plenty to talk about, and the hand wringing is going to start late Thursday night. Well, what's Oregon going to do to us? I mean, one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other, really, but 38-14 is about where I am. Ohio State covering in a game that probably feels a little bit sloppy, but certainly proves that Ohio State is not rebuilding. Ohio State's just reloading.
Yeah, I'm going to stick by 41-24 for my final score prediction. And honestly, I kind of want to see if CJ Stroud takes some chances, and I personally think that they should. I saw in the comments that, you definitely don't want to show too much against Oregon, but if Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson get down the field and, you got to launch one up, take a chance, I'd be fine with that. And I think Ryan Day would be fine with that as well, because you got to learn from your failures too. You can learn from your successes, but you can't play it safe throughout the whole season. You got to take some chances, and why not? If you're up a touchdown or two, and the game definitely seems to be in your advantage, and you're operating on all cylinders, take a chance. I think they should. I don't think you should necessarily play conservatively the whole game, but I think 41-24 would probably be my pick. And Ohio State gets a lot of much needed momentum going into that Oregon game, which will be probably the biggest home game of the year. Penn State, obviously, that's always a big one. But this is going to be an excellent game to watch. It's going to be a lot of recruits in attendance as well. That's my area of expertise there. There's going to be a lot of big time official visitors on campus, so it's going to be a great environment for them. And I think they'll start off the season right against Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a minute since Ohio State has lost an opener. You got to go back to the Meadowlands and the kickoff classic against Miami. I think that was the last regular season opening season loss. Obviously, I remember some week 2 losses. 2014, they lost to Virginia Tech at home. Ended up going on winning the national championship, which is a perfect way for us to dovetail into college football in general.
Yeah,
I think we can kind of go through each of the conferences, and I think we'll probably kind of have the same picks for several of them of who we think the class of those are. But let me start here first and speak more about Texas and OU moving to the SEC and just kind of what that means to the whole house of cards in terms of college football in general. Are we on the path to super conferences, or is this just the SEC showing a little flex right there, and they're going to they've got their teams and everybody else is going to hold pat, and the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 are just going to have their unsigned scheduling alliance? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I honestly think that at least for the next few years, we're gonna just kind of see the SEC be a juggernaut of a conference, and then as they continue to recruit well, because I personally believe that this only helps out Texas and OU on the recruiting front, especially OU with recruiting defensive players, because the one knock on Oklahoma has been players would prefer the SEC and their type of defense and the players they get to go up against over what they would get in the Big 12 at Oklahoma. So I think the SEC will be a really strong conference, once they officially join. I believe it's in 2025. So, but after then, once the recruiting is kind of impacting, programs in Pac-12 and Big 10 and, the ACC, it will kind of get to that point where you can kind of have, I don't know if we'll have like an East versus West kind of deal, because, I personally think that college football operates a lot better when you have 5 conferences, or you have the 5 Power 5 conferences, and then so many other ones. There's just so much diversity there. But at the end of the day, there's the cream of the crop, and it's Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame kind of take their hands in there as well. But there's only really a few legitimate schools that have a shot at winning the championship every year. So why not make super conferences 10, 15 years down the line? I just think a lot of people would be opposed to it because that's not the traditional way of thinking. And a lot of college football is based off traditions, based off of how things operate, the status quo. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that too, but I don't think we would see it at least for another decade or so if it's going to be coming to that.
Let's kind of start right off the bat and take the easy one. The ACC. Is anybody going to be able to knock off Clemson? And that's not a matter of UNC maybe being able to win a head-to-head, but is anybody in that conference going to be able to knock Clemson from that throne? What have they won? Like 7 straight ACC titles, something like that. It's really been Clemson and everybody else over there. Do you see anybody being able to pull off that feat?
No, Clemson is head and shoulders above, every other program in the ACC. And once again, like we were talking about with Minnesota, it doesn't mean that because Ohio State's such a great program that Minnesota isn't one, that they aren't a good program, that, they wouldn't be able to have, success in their own right this upcoming season outside of the Ohio State game. But Clemson's just, they're just kind of in a league of their own. I think maybe Miami, just because, being, I was born in Miami, I've lived in Florida pretty much my whole life. There is this lore, this appeal of Miami that a lot of recruits talk about. The problem is they just don't end up going there. They end up going to Alabama or Georgia or somewhere else. But if Miami ever gets back to what they were a couple decades ago, earlier this century, then I think Miami could potentially contend. But right now, as Dabo's still there at Clemson, and they're continuing to operate on all cylinders, I don't see any school taking over them in the near future.
Let's jump to the Big 12, and obviously 2 of the teams that everybody wants to talk about are the 2 that are moving over to the SEC, 25 at the latest. I would be shocked if they're not playing there by 23. Money talks and BS walks. I wouldn't be surprised if they're playing in 22. But who do you like out of the Big 12? I mean, is this, again, in a lot of ways it just feels that we're just playing the same record as every year, and it's the same 4 or 5 teams that we're talking about. But with that being said, the right answer is the right answer. I don't care the question is what's 2 plus 2? It's 4. 4 any way you look at it. So I don't care how boring, how mundane, how many little first graders answer 4. It doesn't change the fact. Don't say 7 just to try and change things up because you're wrong. So who do you like in the Big 12 after that whole outburst?
Yeah. So I'm going to go with the answer 7 and say TCU. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going with Oklahoma. I mean, there's is there any question about that one? Unless God forbid Spencer Rattler gets injured, they're going to be, once again, the cream of the crop in the Big 12. They're going to win it, in my opinion, and I expect them to be that either number 4 or number 3 team in the college football playoff.
All right, so that's 2. I agree. I still think Oklahoma is going to probably stub its toe. I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to get everybody's best look. They're going to get everybody's best look. Oklahoma's proven that it can't get past either Iowa State or Kansas State in a year. Wouldn't shock me if either of those happened. I don't think Texas is back yet. I think that Steve Sarkisian is going to do some good things in Austin. I'm not sure he's going to be the coach come time that Texas is really entrenched in the SEC. I'm not completely sold there, but I think he's going to be able to get a little bit more of an influx of talent. Obviously the Tom Herman experiment didn't work out well there. With that being said, I think just week in and week out of going through and playing that round robin, playing the 9 teams, I like Oklahoma in terms of being able to put together its whole body of work. Pac-12, now a lot of people want to say Oregon. I certainly have seen USC mentioned there. Fool me once, fool me twice, is what I say about USC. Utah's been mentioned by a couple of people. I really think that of all the conferences to try and handicap, that the Pac-12 is the one, because I can only speak for myself. 5 years ago, staying up and watching Pac-12 after dark was great, and I would do it. Pac-12 network starts, they offload a lot of content over there. That's fine. Big Ten did the same thing. I don't get Pac-12 network. I'm not going to seek out Pac-12 network. So the Pac-12 kind of becomes a forgotten afterthought for me. So I don't follow the Pac-12 that closely. I'm the first one to admit that. So, I know where I'm going to default, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I'm tempted to pick USC. I just think it's really good for college football, in my personal opinion, when USC is, a contender. They're one of the top schools, and they're recruiting well. I think it's beneficial for college football to have that rich program, enjoy success. But I think I'm going to go with Oregon in this one, and that's just based kind of on the limited knowledge about the Pac-12 that I have. I would probably lean toward them. Once again, you mentioned Utah. I think that could be another school to pay attention to, but I'd probably go with Oregon. I think they'll overcome that early season loss to Ohio State and ride it out and win the rest of their games.
Yeah, and I want to add Arizona State to that list, but I don't know how well Arizona State's going to play with the distraction of all of the allegations in terms of them breaking rules during COVID and not being able to have recruits on campus. But lo and behold, they did, and they paid for them, and a lot of other stuff that, again, not my reporting, so I'm just repeating what I've heard. But I think that Oregon is probably going to be the team. I don't think anybody's going to get out of the Pac-12 cleanly in terms of league play, and I think that the Pac-12 will probably be the first conference eliminated in 21 for college football playoff consideration for all intents and purposes, just because sometimes a league will cannibalize itself because there are just too many good teams, and then sometimes a league will just cannibalize itself because there aren't enough good teams. I don't know if there are enough good teams in the Pac-12, and that's not a slight on Oregon. I mean, we're going to see them firsthand here in a couple of weeks, but I don't think that there's enough differentiation between the top and the middle. There certainly is between the top and the bottom of that conference, but the top and the middle, I think that's all operates within a margin of error, and because of that, I don't think that we're going to see one team just rise to the top and go 9-0 in league play.
Yeah, all I know is that I don't believe the Pac-12 is going to be represented in the college football playoff. I think it's it's going to be the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and potentially the Big 12. I don't know about Notre Dame if they're going to be able to get that fourth spot, but. I think they'll get some good bowl games between Oregon, USC, and Utah, and that's all you can you can pretty much ask for if you're the Pac-12 at this point.
I'm skipping the Big Ten now because one, we've kind of talked about, and two, we'll talk about it again. But let's go to the SEC. You've got Alabama, you've got UGA. People want to talk about Florida. People want to talk about LSU. I don't know who the hell is going to be quarterback for LSU. To me, it's really, people want to talk about A&M, obviously. To me, it's kind of two flavors, and that's UGA and Alabama. And we see Alabama every year do what Alabama does, and we see UGA every year do what UGA does. And unfortunately for UGA fans, they're not mutually inclusive. I mean, it's so... You're down there in SEC country. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? I'll defer to you here.
Yeah, I mean, look, as someone who's from Gainesville, has lived in Gainesville, obviously everyone thinks it's going to be the University of Florida. They think Emory Jones is going to be, a Heisman contender, Heisman Trophy contender. I can't bet against Nick Saban. I can't do it. It's one of those things. He's kind of like the Tom Brady, in terms of people in football that you just can't bet against. He does it every single year routinely. Even when Alabama takes a step back, they always take 10 steps forward in that next season. And, I think they're going to even elevate themselves upon what they did last year with Bryce Young at the helm. I think he can potentially take that offense to even more higher levels than what Mac Jones even did, and that stellar wide receiver group that they had. I'm really interested in seeing how Alabama adjusts early on in the season. Obviously, they have that neutral site game with Miami in Atlanta, and then they also have that road game against Florida. But I think those are a couple good early tests for them, and they're going to be back where they always are, and they're going to be in the college football playoff. And I won't go further than that, but I can't see any team usurping them this season.
I talked about my 2+2 example and not answering 7 just to be different. I don't think it's a situation of where picking UGA would be saying 7. I just don't trust Kirby Smart. I just don't trust UGA. I think UGA is pretty close in terms of talent from 1 to 40 on the roster.
Oh, absolutely.
I just don't think that the UGA coaching staff has the same chops that the Alabama coaching staff does. And let's not forget, Nick Saban is constantly replenishing that staff with his 17,000 analysts and everything else, but because all of his assistants go on and get head coaching jobs,
Yeah.
including Kirby Smart. But, I just don't know if I'm feeling UGA being able to go to Atlanta and defeating Alabama. So I'm probably going to have to say Alabama. And once again, I just feel like I'm going chalk. I'm going chalk here with Oregon, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Clemson. And then, of course, I think everybody knows who I'm going to be picking in the Big Ten, but we'll get to that one in a second. But I think this could be a really entertaining year in the SEC. I'm really excited to see what Lane Kiffin is able to do at Ole Miss this year. Matt Corral is a year older. You're still going to have kind of your dead weight. South Carolina is crappy right now. Vandy,
they're starting a graduate assistant. That's a ball.
I've got some buddies who are involved with the Vanderbilt program. I don't really want to sit there and crank on them too much, but I don't know what to expect out of Mississippi State. But I think when you sit there and you look at the top tier of the SEC all the way through the middle to even middle low, I think those are all going to be very exciting games to watch.
Yeah,
I won't get to watch all of them based on the nature of my job, but yeah. I don't want this to sound like some sort of SEC channel or commercial, because people will be like, oh, noon is all about the SEC. No, but I just think that I'm more excited about the middle of the SEC than I am about the middle of the Big Ten.
Yeah, like when you think of the middle of the SEC, I think of, potentially Kentucky, having a few games there where they can play, the role of the team upsetting, program's chances to make the SEC championship. So I'm really interested in seeing those games that they play. I think they play Florida and Georgia, and LSU. So I'll be paying attention to that as well. But yeah, the SEC will be probably the most entertaining conference in terms of you just don't know where it's going to go. Like in the ACC, we know it's barring injury, it's going to be Clemson. We know in the Big Ten, barring injury, it's going to be Ohio State. Barring injury in the Big 12, it's probably going to be Oklahoma. But the SEC, with Alabama having a new quarterback, I think Bryce Young is going to be stellar and just once again continue that line that Alabama has established of producing quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think the SEC will have the most drama out of all the conferences and thus the most headlines.
All right, to the Big Ten. I'm taking Ohio State. I mean, just plain and simple. I'm taking Ohio State. But the question I ask you, I guess I'll ask you first. One, are you taking somebody other than Ohio State? And if that answer is no, where is the biggest challenge in the Big Ten going to come from? Is it Penn State out of the East? Is it somebody out of the West? Potentially a Wisconsin or Iowa. Neither of them are on the regular season schedule, but could they trip up Ohio State and Indianapolis potentially? Is it somebody else? I mean, we can cross Nebraska off the list. We can just cross Nebraska off the list. That was horrible. Adrian Martinez, God bless you. I'm sure you're a wonderful young man, but you were very difficult to watch.
Yeah, I don't see any team giving Ohio State a stumble this year. The one game that I am kind of interested in seeing is the road game against Indiana, but talk about great schedule placement. That being, right there in the middle of the season, they get like 6 or 7 games under their belt before then. And then preparing for that big road matchup. I'm kind of interested in seeing how the secondary responds after getting torched last season. It wasn't necessarily in my personal opinion, I expected Ohio State to win that game, even through the struggles that Justin Fields had last year during that game. But even with Justin Fields as a starting quarterback, it was a fairly close game against Indiana at home. I'm really interested in seeing how they respond on the road, but I do think they'll win that one. And I don't see anyone in the West giving them any issues this year. I'm tempted to say that potentially a team like Wisconsin could, but I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think Ohio State will roll throughout the season. I have them going perfect until they get to the college football playoff, and then it's kind of a toss-up there. I have to reevaluate them, but yeah, I want to get your thoughts, but I don't see any team in the West giving them any issues in Indianapolis.
want to say hi to Cheryl. I saw her just a little bit ago over on the Mark Rogers show. I had to dump out of there so we could do this one. I promise I'm going to make sure that I'm not doing my shows on the same day, certainly within the same hour, more or less, of the Mark Rogers show. Some extenuating circumstances that I can't really get into now of why I needed to do this show today. So I'll kind of leave it at that. All right. So we've gone through the Power Five. Let's throw Notre Dame into the mix. Let's just kind of go through it. I mean, we could kind of talk about Group of Five or whatever. Cincinnati, highly thought of right now at this point. Who do you have as your Final Four in the college football playoff?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Don't necessarily know the order. That's where I'm a little bit tripped up on. I would actually put Alabama in the latter half right now because I think they may suffer a loss early on in the season, whereas I think Clemson and Ohio State will go in perfect. So I'd probably have Clemson or Ohio State 1 and 2. Probably give Clemson the advantage just because I don't necessarily know what's going to go on in terms of how the poll makers evaluate both of those teams. But Clemson has an easier schedule, in my opinion, and thus I think will be regarded more favorably. So I'd probably take Clemson 1, Ohio State 2, Alabama 3, and then Oklahoma 4.
That would be something to see an Ohio State-Alabama national semifinal. Of course, people will be like, well, after last year, don't want to see them until the final. You're dealing with the top 4 teams at that point. I have no faith in Oklahoma, but I don't know. Does UGA step into that role? I mean, do we finally see a Group of 5 team? We don't know. It's always an academic event to talk about all this when we don't know how the committee is going to react each year. Yeah. It seems like the committee each year kind of has a little bit of a different mandate. It's kind of like officiating. We're going to focus on illegal linemen down the field or whatever. And if you're 3.5 steps down, they're going to flag you or whatever, or, taunting. So what is going to be the mandate for the College Football Playoff Committee this year? Are they going to put more onus on, just do wins mean more? Do good losses mean more? What means more at this point? But Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, I might throw Georgia in there. I don't know. I think that while I don't trust Kirby, I think that if we do see an Alabama UGA SEC championship game in Atlanta, I think we can see UGA keep it close. And I think that
you're saying Georgia beats Clemson?
I think they could beat Clemson, and I don't think it's going to hurt Clemson because everybody's going to be like, well, the ACC is such dog crap that is, where are they going to get their points? Well, I think that the ACC is going to be artificially inflated anyway. I think Carolina is going to be pretty good. I think people are going to overinflate Miami to a certain extent. Sorry, I know you're from Miami, but I see an overinflation there that could happen in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I just think that UGA could sit there and get to the mountaintop and then just stumble, but still be rewarded for getting there just because of the SEC. It's a gut feeling. It's probably more of I trust Oklahoma's defense less than I trust, or more than I don't trust anybody else. Everybody's like, well, Oklahoma's defense is fixed. Alex Grinch, former Ohio State coordinator or assistant coordinator or whatever, for about half a second, he's fixed it. Well, anything you learned in 2020, take with a gigantic grain of salt, because we just really don't know what that looks like. I'm not sold on Oklahoma's defense. I don't think that it's going to be able to carry them to the promised land. I feel pretty confident saying either Kansas State or Iowa State, if not both, knock off Oklahoma. And I don't know if there is enough meat on the bone in the Big 12 to be able to absorb a loss like that. And again, I know we're just saying, well, you just said Clemson can build itself up based on, on whatever. And, how do you sit there and rank 2 through whatever in the ACC versus 2 through 10 in the Big 12? I don't know. I'm not on the committee. I'm just paid to talk. So that's what I'm doing. I'm talking. But, that's where I'm at here on August 31st. Check in with me in a week, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. I may feel different.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to check in, in a week in terms of our predictions, because so much is going to be happening in this first weekend, and and I'll even throw in the first couple of weeks just because Ohio State has that game against Oregon that a lot of people will be paying attention to. But I mean, we feel very confident. I think we could say in Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson being three of those four schools. And honestly, I think that's all that matters because I don't see whoever comes in as that fourth team being able to win the championship, whether you think it's Georgia or whether you think it's Oklahoma or Notre Dame, whoever you think it may be as that fourth school. I just think the gap between 1 through 3 and then 4 and the rest is just too wide of a margin to pick anyone else besides Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State to win it all.
Let's wrap this up by just maybe some memories of a year on the road. We've worked together a little bit, a year plus. We've gone on a couple of road trips. We went during the grips of the COVID shutdown largely. We went through the Atlantic East, through Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina. And then, of course, we did our 2 weeks on the southern swing. What are some of your favorite memories that you take out of that as we just kind of look back here at the end of the month?
I mean, one of the most interesting experiences was going to Virginia and, being able to see Travion Henderson and just, see his work ethic. He trained multiple times per day and how he said he wasn't actually, that big of an eater. Like he's a very selective and picky eater. And to kind of see the body transformation that he went through with the previous season, him being a little bit more skinny, put on some more weight. So just seeing his work ethic was awesome. And kind of staying in Virginia there, also being able to talk with Tristan Lee and his brother Aiden and just, it wasn't freezing temperatures, but it was cold. If you listen to that,
it was cold. It was cold.
Yeah, if you listen to that interview, I was struggling. Tristan was struggling. It was a very difficult situation, but great memories made there, and also being able to go to Texas and in Dallas and Atlanta and cover the rivals camps there and talk with kids before the events, kind of see them in person. That's the best thing that you want out of these experiences. Going and talking with Sean Murphy and Tyleek Williams in a gym is nice, but you want to see them in person and see how they play and things of that nature. So yeah, also stopping by Buc-ee's, that was my second time ever being there. You placed an emphasis on that, and honestly, yeah, you're absolutely right. It lived up to all the expectations. The jerk turkey there was right there. It was awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say it's always a bad thing when the fat guy is the one who has all the food recommendations. I remember during we had a chance to hang out with one of our board members at like a brewery pizza place out in Virginia. We had a good time there. We ended up at another place and had like the world's largest calzones. They were ginormous. I mean, we were both trying to work, and I thought they were going to have to bring 2 people out to bring each of the calzones out. They were huge, and I was so hungry. I think I finished it, which, everything considered, I'm not a huge eater. Talking about Travion Henderson, I'm not a huge eater. I don't eat a lot. I drink a couple beers, which I probably should cut back on. But, I remember that. Certainly, having the chance to see the throwing session for Quinn Ewers was great. Having that first, a lot of other sites ended up having interviews with him, but we kind of had the first one. There were some rumors out there that, somebody's brother's cousin's dog catcher's hairdresser was like, the assistant custodian at South Lake Carroll, and Quinn was wavering. Well, we were able to get right out there and do that. The Kai Stokes interview, that's going to be something I'm going to remember as well, where Joseph, I drove and did what I needed to do. Joseph did the job of keeping the schedule in place. And as things adjusted and we were supposed to go to IMG and they weren't practicing on the day we needed to, or we just couldn't connect. That's all I remember is we couldn't connect. So Joseph calls an audible at the line, and we go and we see Richard Young, who is going to be very much a real target for Ohio State. I think it's going to be Ohio State, Alabama all the way. And we go and see Kai Stokes, and it was just kind of you guys should probably go see Kai Stokes. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, he committed to Ohio State. So we were able to, we didn't do some hat dance or anything like that. We didn't necessarily break the commitment. We let Kai put it out there on social, but we had the story done and in the can and everything else. tremendous young man, really excited. And then we also saw Clay Wheaton as well on that trip. So that was, that was, of all things considered, a day that really could have gone to heck for us, because IMG fell apart and we got, a lot of content there. I enjoyed going to Shamada Madonna and getting
Kenyatta Jackson and Ryan Turner.
Yes, that was, that was there. I mean, I'm certain there were some meals along the way that we had that were good. Unfortunately, you go on the road as much as I do, they all kind of start to run together after a while, apparently outside of the calzone. And I just, spending, based on all the trips, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, I guess, hanging out with Joseph, getting to know Joseph, finding out his secret passion of wanting to be like a movie reviewer or whatever. Just so many good memories that I will take, here on out from that trip of hanging out with Joseph and being able to do this, work closely with him. I know he learned from me. I learned from him. Just a really great experience.
Same here, Kevin. And just seeing that your passion and wanting to put out the best content for the subscribers on the Horseshoe Lounge, and really caring about the community, and placing an emphasis on meeting people in person, and continuing to build those relationships, just very inspiring. And I had a great time on those 3 separate trips that we took, and they were fantastic. I also forgot to mention one of the highlights, talking about Quinn Ewers, is that the shirt that we saw him throwing, it was, if you all were able to see the video of it, it was a picture of the deer that he had shot and put the Blanco hat on, and he had his grandmother knit that for him. I thought that was a really cool thing. Learned a lot about Quinn during that trip, and we got to go down and see Caleb Burton at 7 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, we had to drive down from the DFW area down to Austin, and we got to see him do a pretty much a practice session for us. Like they did that specifically for us. So I appreciated him and his father setting that up, as well as Bo Edmondson, really talented kid at his new school at Lake Travis. So very interested in seeing what he does. But yeah, I had a great time during those trips, and the meals were awesome. Hanging out with you, the car rides was great. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
All good times, all good times. Well, we're closing in on the top of the hour, and as I told Joseph off air, I've got to take this computer in to be serviced by Apple. So I'm gonna cut us out here a minute early or 2 minutes early. But I want to thank everybody here for taking part in this show. Certainly plan on. As I said, I'm probably going to start maybe next week more of a national show here on this channel. I'll be able to rotate some guests in and out. Certainly going to have Joseph on whenever he wants to be on it as well, to just, give his perspective, being in a different part of the country than me. Just, he sees things differently than I do. Maybe some other guests along the way, but certainly more of a national show. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Hit the bell. My plan is to have a much more regular schedule on this show when it becomes a national show. Got some other things in the works. Joseph's got some other things in the work. Keep it tuned into social, just to see what's going on, and we'll keep you informed of what's happening. But once again, I just want to thank everybody. Your continued viewership means so much to me, and it means a lot. So thank you. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you to everybody. Chris, Cheryl, where goes one? Who else ever had kind of jumped in here? We have It's Just Me, Tim. Yeah. I know Texas are busted. I know a lot of people come in and out of the chats. Again, we didn't promote this one enough. I promise with the national show, hopefully we're going to get a sponsor for it, some things there. It'll become more of a regular fixture. But thanks so much for everybody. A dog named Brutus, seeing you right there. Everybody else, I'm just, so thankful. Joseph, any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you all for your continued support. We greatly appreciate it. These interactions on the show, they make the show. Like Kevin and I can do this. We can record podcast versions of this, but we prefer doing the live shows because we want to interact with you all. So you all truly do make the show. So thank you all for tuning in, and once again, stay tuned for what's coming up next.
Absolutely. So for Joseph, I'm Kevin. We've been here for about an hour. Once again, BIA Live. Look for us coming back in the next week or two with a rebranded national show here on this channel. Some other surprises along the way, and have a wonderful weekend. Go Bucks! Enjoy the game, and anybody's going to Minneapolis, safe travels. Once again, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe now.